to the People Matters Tech HR Futurist Forum, which is exclusively designed for you considering your time zone. And we will also like to focus on more strategic priorities for the HR leaders in the Australia and New Zealand region. Thank you for taking out time and joining us today. The world is changing fast, and so is the people and work strategies in order to keep pace with the changing demands of business. Today, in this exclusive 2 hour track, we are going to have three leading leaders from Australia to help us with what are the top priorities for the HR function in the region and what are some of the best practices that most organizations are implementing at this point in time. Thank you so much once again. Let me quickly take you to the agenda for this session. We will start with what are the top priorities of 2021 for HR leaders. And for this session, we have with us Sarah McCann Bartlett, CEO and MD of AHRI. After that, we'll move on to a case study and moderated discussion on adoption of agile methodology for HR with Monica Watts, CHRO Elmo Software. And post that, we'll deep dive into a fireside chat with Alex Badenoch, Group Executive, Transformation Communications and People, Testra, and along with Esther Martinez, CEO and Editor-in-Chief for People Matters, on managing the future workplace experience. And now, without further ado, let me invite Sarah and hear what are some of the key HR issues that organizations are facing, especially during and post the pandemic, and how are they moving from resolving to recovering and beyond. Sarah has extensive global experience in membership and trade bodies and has held senior roles across a variety of sectors in Australia, the UK, and the USA. Previously, Sarah held a number of senior executive positions at the Victorian Building and Plumbing Industry Commissions, including as Deputy Commissioner. Welcome, Sarah. Looking forward to hearing your insights. Over to you now.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, and People Matters for inviting me to speak today. And hello again, everyone. As I said in my earlier introduction, I started as the Australian HR Institute CEO just over a year ago. Now, on paper, the timing looks pretty bad, but in reality, it was an opportunity. Coming into a new leadership role as a crisis breaks means that dive into the organisation, its people, its finances, its future strategy and vision is much shorter and deeper than it otherwise would be, and that's a good thing. And despite the lockdowns and lack of face-to-face interaction, the relationships I've been able to forge with many of our members have been as deep or deeper because of that mutual experience of crisis. Like many member organisations, ARI supported our members through COVID. And again, like many others, we took the opportunity to reset our vision and strategy. We're now in the implementation phase of a reset that's going to broaden our member engagement, update our offer, and give ARI and our members a stronger voice. I won't say anything more about ARI except to acknowledge the ARI members who are here today. It's always great to see you. Today, I've been asked to speak about the priorities for HR leaders in 2021. Now, that's a pretty big piece for 20 minutes. So I've selected the themes that I'm asked about a lot. Today, I'm going to focus on the collective transformation that we've all experienced and how that's driving the need for a culture reset. I also want to talk about the dangers of drifting into a new workplace model, the growth of employer responsibility for employee well-being, and what I call the reskilling imperative. So kicking off with what I call the collective transformation, if we think about our experiences last year, we all saw a massive change to our organisations and our business models. Now, the nature of that change was partly dependent on your location, which country you were in, and the health, the economic, and the government responses there. It was also dependent on your sector. Some sectors saw demand for their products and services come to an immediate and an abrupt halt, while others saw that demand skyrocket. And while many workplaces made a wholesale shift to remote working, there were others who had to keep attending the physical workplace through the crisis. So what is it that we all had in common? First of all, the health emergency meant that the changes we experienced in our workplaces were immediate. Organisational change does not usually happen that fast. Second, for most, the extent of the change was really large. And if we compare our organisations and our workplaces pre and post-COVID, we do look and feel significantly different, and many of us are continuing to change and adapt. which leads me on to culture. If we were operating in normal times and we were considering such a major shift in our operating model, we would have treated this as a change project, and a major one at that, which in usual times would have meant a culture change program to underpin this major change. But of course, the majority of us didn't do this at the time. However, I believe that this should occur now, whether or not the organisation is moving to a different model, because the business and customer landscape and the employee experience have all changed so significantly over the last year or so. And at the very least, a review of the organisation's values and ways of working would be beneficial. And for those looking to move to a new workplace model, a culture stream should be part of this change. This becomes even more urgent as we look at the events in Australia over the last month or so, where we've got workplaces, schools, parliaments, where the culture has allowed sexual harassment, bullying, and abuse. And this isn't limited to Australia. Some may say that this isn't needed in their organisation, but previous research that RE's undertaken has found that many leaders don't understand the state of their organisational culture. RE's 5 Hard Truths report that we ran in 2019 found that CEOs' sense of reality was more rosy than for executives and for senior managers, and significantly more rosy than for their employees. So if we look at some of the stats, 77% of CEOs said that their organisation didn't tolerate mavericks who cut corners to achieve short-term results. Now that compares, 77%, that compares with 46% of executives and senior managers and 41% of other employees. That's a big difference. RE's August 2020 Pulse survey on COVID's impact on culture told us that 71% of HR practitioners believe that building a culture with a remote workforce is a challenge. And to sum up on culture and the importance of culture change at this point in time is, I would really say that any business that isn't considering a culture reset or refresh at this time is really doing themselves a disservice. For those of us in countries that are moving into post-pandemic recovery, we're now contemplating the future of our workplaces. A lot of people I'm talking to at the moment say that they don't really know what their future workplace will look like, or that they're letting it develop organically. For example, they do know that their workforce is going to be hybrid, but they don't know where they want to sit on that continuum between fully physical and fully virtual. Nor are they talking to employees, customers, and stakeholders to find out. And the business and customer outcome side is sometimes getting lost. There's this, what I call collective drift into some sort of new workplace. And that new workplace is usually hybrid. I'm becoming more and more convinced that anything hybrid is hardest. Like many organisations, RE runs events, and more or less it's pretty straightforward to run a fully virtual event, and the same with a physical event. But actually getting a hybrid event right is really difficult in things like even in attendee experience and delivery. And things like pricing is even difficult. And I feel it's going to be the same with the workplace, that a true hybrid model is going to be harder than either of two ends of that workplace spectrum. Now, I'm not saying it, don't do it, definitely not. But what I am saying is that we need to be giving it the time and thought, the consultation, the project management, and the training that we would with any major change project. And if we don't, I think we'll default back to what we had before, or worse, we'll end up with something that's lesser, that meets nobody's needs. And so what I'm calling this organisational drift is the worst possible outcome. And I'm saying don't let it happen. Now, what your workplace looks like is up to you and your employees, and you need to drive it. But one of the questions that I'm being asked a lot is, how do I do this? One framework is to decide what you want your workplace to look like in a year or 2 years, and then work back from that in very practical terms. The framework might have a number of themes. For example, the level of flexibility that's desired. What do you want your workplace relationships to look like? What about individual performance and how are you going to drive that? And what are your financial imperatives and how do all of these things actually support those financial imperatives and goals? So for flexibility, you might ask yourselves what your optimum level of flexibility is, taking employee and business needs into account. And I say optimum, not maximum. What type of work roles, interactions might best be undertaken face-to-face, and what's best done remotely? Relationships is a real emerging theme, growing and maintaining effective relationships between employees and within and between teams. The employee life cycle. I can hear somebody who's not on mute. Thank you. You might like to consider the employee life cycle, how to engage with remote, including interstate employees, how technology and other means might proactively compensate for some of those previous face-to-face activities. In terms of individual performance, organisations will want to ensure that they have high levels of employee engagement and that coaching and capability development remains a focus and it's effective in this new hybrid workplace. And then all of this will then start to tell you what your cadence or cycle of physical and remote interactions will be for executives, for managers, employees, and for your teams. Some organisations are bringing an additional lens to this and they're asking, does our face-to-face activity actually have to be done in a traditional office? And how does this flow on to an ideal physical environment, head office versus satellite spaces, floor space, training spaces, individual desks, hot desking, and then of course, what are some of the financial implications of all of this? And then you can really start to work backwards, including considering vaccination rollout timelines to guide transition. What I have to say is there is no one specific template for this. Everyone's going to have to make some decisions and some calls. And of course, what you've planned won't be what you end up with because you'll be in a cycle of feedback, measurement and adjustment. But at least you'll have a plan and you won't be drifting into the worst of both worlds. One side note is that the issue of roles that can't be done remotely and the risk of creating a two-tier workplace, those who can work remotely and those who can't. And I'm seeing some employers tackle this by providing other benefits to workers whose roles won't allow them to work remotely. For example, other flexibility benefits. This brings me on to the increased or broader responsibility employers now have for employee wellbeing. Last night, I was reading a piece of McKinsey research that said we're in the midst of what they're calling the great exhaustion, with around 50% of employees saying that they're feeling at least somewhat burnt out. What was incredibly interesting was that their research showed that one thing that burnt out employees have in common is that they've all got leaders who've yet to get specific about the future of hybrid work. So that's another argument against organisational drift. But anyway, back to employee wellbeing. Over COVID, we've seen a natural extension of what the workplace constitutes. For those companies that have always had remote workers, this wasn't a change, but for many employers it was. And they had to get to grips with what was and what wasn't their responsibility. Some of that was physical safety and liability, and we were asked all sorts of questions around physical safety and employer liability. And of course, there were also lots of questions about the provision of office equipment and the responsibility of the employer in funding home offices. Then while we were in lockdown, Australia had the High Court case that found a woman who was very sadly killed while working from home by her domestic and work partner, was actually killed in the course of her employment. Now, the issue in this case was around insurance, so the insurer had to pay compensation. But the case itself brought the issue of domestic violence to the fore for employers, notwithstanding the facts of this case were very specific. And there are 3 points here for me. First, it reminded employers of their obligation to provide a safe workplace for employees, even if that workplace is at home. Second, it meant that employers should be asking the question for employees working at home. And we recommend that employers have a catch-all question on their working from home safety checklist. Maybe it's something like, is there any reason why it might not be safe for you to work from home? If the answer is that they might not be safe, it's the employer's obligation to find them a safe place to work, which might be access to an office or a seat at a local shared space. And the third point is that hopefully the awareness around domestic violence that we saw during COVID and the realization that in fact it can be an employer issue will get us all speaking more freely about domestic violence, just like mental health 10, 15 or so years ago. I've talked about physical safety, but during COVID, there was also a sharp increase in the focus on the mental health and well-being of employees. Of course, this was something we'd already seen happening, but during COVID, it was accelerated and expanded. We had much more open discussions in the workplace about mental health and well-being. We often opened meetings with an "are you okay" type of conversation. And the expectation was that employers would provide even broader support and programs for employees. There are also a lot more discussions happening about psychological safety in the workplace. And last year, one of the states in Australia consulted on a draft code of practice for managing workplace psychological health risks. And if one state agency is doing this, it's likely that we're going to see similar codes of guidance developed across Australia. So I see this expectation around employers' focus on employee mental well-being continuing to broaden. Moving on to skills, ARI ran a survey last year called Skills for a Post-Pandemic Future, and this research shows that the skills required for post-pandemic recovery are lacking in many workplaces. HR practitioners told us that having the right skills had a critical impact for organisations during the pandemic. And they told us that the skills that were among the contributing factors to their organisation's survival throughout the crisis were things like change management, effective leadership, adaptability and flexibility, resilience, and good communication. They also identified that these were the skills that would be crucial for organisations post-pandemic, plus digital skills. Now, previously we referred to these skills as soft skills, which I think is a terrible description. It really underplays their importance. So I've started calling them essential skills. Interestingly, the report also found that half of HR practitioners believed that their workforce was ready for 2021. So only half believed that their workforce was ready for 2021, and even fewer believed that their workforce had those skills they identified as critical for future success. This, combined with a complete lack of skilled immigration into Australia and New Zealand, has led to what we're seeing in organisations at the moment, a real focus on increasing organisational capability. Now, you'd think, given all of this, that organisations would be looking to recruit for specific skills. But in fact, while 80% of HR practitioners told us in this survey that they believed their organisation would recruit in the next 6 months, only 22% said they were confident they'd be recruiting for the specific skills they needed to be future ready. I wonder whether this is because recruitment is often seen as a short-term or responsive activity to fill a role or a specific need at this point in time, often driven by the business who are under pressure. But in fact, recruitment activity has to be strategic and be looking to the future. And if it isn't, then the skills gap is going to remain. And it's up to HR to advise the business on how to analyse their future skills needs and recruit for them. And of course, the essential skills are going to be part of this. The same survey asked about the skills that HR themselves drew on during the pandemic and what skills will be important for HR into the future. And the respondents identified the same kinds of skills, the essential skills, as being required for them to do their roles. But in addition, our HR respondents also identified well-being, resilience, and psychological safety as essential skills for themselves. Of course, pre-pandemic, these were seen as important attributes, but the pandemic has really shown their importance to both employees and organisations thriving. Another set of skills that respondents identified for HR were focused on industrial relations, employee relations, and compliance. Not an essential skill that I've been in the way that I've been defining essential skills, but certainly essential from a technical knowledge and implementation point of view. And when our research threw this up, I wondered why. And I've got a few thoughts. First of all, COVID threw up a lot of these kinds of issues. Government support programs, working from home obligations, redundancies, furloughs or stand downs, and protecting against unfair dismissal. It also threw up gaps in specialist knowledge or training. And we at ARI received a huge number of queries about these issues from generalist HR practitioners who weren't IR or ER specialists and needed support. And looking forward, the changes we're expecting to see in our future workplaces also create IR and ER issues, more flexible working, remote working, potentially more international remote workforces, and changes to roles and skills. What was really interesting and worrying, though, was that in this survey, only 36% of respondents said they were confident that their HR team currently have the skills required for post-pandemic recovery. So we're looking at upskilling there. Now, there's no doubt we're at an HR tech conference, that with the advancement of technology, data and machine learning, that HR's role is going to change. And as technology advances get faster and faster, the HR function itself is going to have to be agile, resilient and change able. But importantly, technology advancement itself is going to enable HR. The functional side of the HR role is going to recede, as will the processing of data and eventually much of the analytics. So the role of HR will pivot to focus on those higher level functions that utilize the data and the analytics, such as partnering with the business to drive strategic decision making and enabling the workforce through coaching, directed learning and competency development. And I do see the growth of a necessary strategic partnership between HR and the office of the CIO or CTO as part of this change. Now, the formal part of our time together is coming to a close. Thank you very much for your attention. And I do hope that our paths cross in the future, whether it is online or in person. And do please look after your own well-being, particularly our friends in India at this point in time. Thank you to People Matters and the team. It's great working with you. And Yasmin, back to you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was such an insightful session. There's so many thoughts, so many insights that you shared. I'm sure our audience here would have learned so much. Are there any questions anybody would like to ask Sarah directly? You can unmute yourself and ask. I think there's so much that Sarah has, the kind of wisdom she has. I'm sure she'll be able to help you with some challenges that you are facing right now. And how Sarah talked about how it's all about working backwards now. You see, and that's what is going to enable you in your journey going forward. So anybody would like to ask any questions?
And I do think, Yasmin, that piece of McKinsey research that I picked up last night, it was just so on point for the sorts of things that we've been talking about with our members.
Absolutely agree, yes. And as you said, I think the point about how we no longer need to call them soft skills, they are essential skills. I think that's also very important. So anybody who'd like to share their thoughts, their inputs, or ask questions to Sarah, please so do that. You can also type in your question in the chat section and I'll pick it up. So with that is also fine. So I'm just giving you a few minutes to probably mull over it and put in your questions for Sarah here in the chat section. That'll be really nice.
And certainly I know that Monica and Elmo have really been focused on what their future workplace looks like. And we've talked about it quite a lot because the Elmo culture relies on vibrancy and relationships in the workplace. And that's what's really underpinned Monica's change, hasn't it, Monica?
Yep. Very much so. Very, very much so. And Sarah, you and I have talked on and off about the essential human skills. Everybody will know it's like a red flag to me as a bull. It's, I always say, try being HR, they all say it's a walk in the park, try Jurassic Park, you're dealing with every possible beast that there is out there. Yeah. There's nothing easy about it. And so understanding, using Sarah's, particulars of, how do we actually bring those forward? How do we enhance those? But also, how do we recognize those in our people and acknowledge and celebrate instead of just the technical components? I think that is something that we are still on a journey for all the way through. And that culture realignment, Sarah, and that values realignment will definitely help to leverage those essential skills up.
That's right. And more, we hear organisations saying, the what is incredibly important, but that the how is really elevated.
I think that if you change that word, especially in the wellness side, instead of saying, what are you doing? How are you doing? Because as you know, work and life, and at the moment, the blending and blurring is so synonymous. And by changing that what, especially if you've got historical data or even relationship that says, I know how Sarah has been performing, I know how Monica has been performing, hang on, something's not right, something's not sitting right. And especially in a 2D world in particular, when you consider we are, yes, attuned to each other on a flat screen than we are in a social setting. And so it's picking up different cues, those different cues that says, well, tell me, how are you doing? How are you doing? What's happening in your world? Not what are you doing? So yeah, that key shift between what to how has the biggest leap in regards to productivity and well-being, hands down.
Absolutely agree. Thanks for sharing that, Monica. So, any questions from our audience members here who joined us? Anything you'd like to share or ask Sarah?
Another
I think,
thing that sorry?
Yes, please.
no, I think what you guys mentioned absolutely makes sense. I mean, look, COVID or no COVID, employee well-being should be at the forefront of whatever business trying to achieve, right? People matters. The historic issue our function has faced is how have we translated an employee well-being into a tangible business value creation. So, for example, to correlate that if this is the pocket of your business that has historically have lower scores on employee well-being, hence from a business outcome perspective, this is where you guys suffer. So I think that's where we have sort of lost the battle from an HR perspective, is where we haven't dug deep in our data and clearly brought it very clear from a clear terms and speak to business in the language they would understand, that this why employee well-being is important, why gender diversity is important. So if I'm running an NAB bank, the branches where I have higher women representation, my customer ENPS goes high. Can I show that correlation between a higher gender diverse team and the customer ENPS? So I think that's where I think we have lost the battle. But everyone theoretically, if you go and ask business, will understand employee well-being is absolutely important. But then they will ask you, who drives employee well-being? So if there are 6 or 5 drivers of employee well-being, which driver has the major impact? Hence, how can I amplify that driver? So in that employee well-being journey, is the supervisor the main driver? If yes, then let's equip the supervisor. If not, who are the other important drivers that is driving employee well-being? So I think that's where data is so important, but data needs to be put into context and presented to business, and then we can get magic from them.
I think besides loving your absolute passion, Kingshuk, absolutely and utterly loved it. You've got to remember the conversation I'm about to have with you about Agile will help unpack that of what the whole sense of it versus slices of value in building that. And can I just advise, or just remind, quality over time becomes quantity. Right. So most of the things that we have been associated with, not including churn or retention or all of those things, employee sentiment over time actually has a very strong commercial outcome and impact to the business. And if it's remembering that by taking how somebody is feeling, how they are relating, how the reward and recognition, how the peer-to-peer engagement and activities are occurring, how is the cross-pollination, cross-boarding, secondment, boomerangs, all of those actually tells you very strongly the sentiment and well-being by teams, by individuals, and then organically by the entire business. And that is all quality-based, that's built, that then delivers the quantity base. And I think that's something that we can be better at. We definitely can be, but adapting some agile methodology for that, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, how do I get all this data to tell the story? The analysis paralysis that we go to and say, well, what do and how do I tell the business the right data? The first thing is to show them that there is data, and then let them say to you, what do you want to know? because you can give so much. Really what you want to do is solve a business's problem with a solution. So ask them it, and then go and find the data, because it's there. And whether it's quality as a leading indicator into a lagging indicator really makes no difference. You can hypothesize and then test it. But it's very fundamentally, you are correct. It's one of the, Ari and Elmo did the HR industry benchmark survey in 2021, which was released. You can see that on the Elmo website and on the Ari's website as well. You can access from there. It talks about the fact that one of the number one concerns or number one impacts was to do with wellness and well-being. So if businesses have shifted it, the what word to the how word, that doesn't cost money. And most businesses think, I don't have the money to be able to impact, because besides an EAP, an employee assistance program, or some other resources, I don't need to feed people. I need to love people. I need to talk to people. I need to understand how they are. And that's all free. And so given the fact it's the number one priority and it's free, it should be easy to do.
And Monica, I spoke about psychological safety in the workplace.
Yes.
Creating a psychologically safe workplace isn't about spending money. It's actually about our communication, our relationships, showing our vulnerabilities, and allowing people the space to be them.
Yeah, very, very true. Be your authentic self. It's too hard to be something else, two different spaces, home and work. And there's solid integration right now, with our digital worlds, everything that we've got between smart devices, we're available 24/7. And the new world of work in new generations, 5 generations in the workforce, it's not a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday block. It's outcome based. So, yes.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you, Sarah, for answering that. And Kingshuk for raising that point, also very important here. Any other questions do we have for Sarah? Anyone here who has a question that they'd like to ask Sarah, then please do let us know. All right, I think so. That's about it. Thank you once again, Sarah, for sharing these insights with us. It was very, very well researched. The insights were very well thought through. Thank you. It was really helpful. I'm sure everyone here in the session would agree to that. And thank you for giving us time for this session. So thanks once again, Sarah.
It's always a pleasure, Yasmin.
Great.
Cheers, Sarah.
Great.
Always love hearing you.
Absolutely. And now it's time to move on to our next session with Monica Watt. Monica Watt is CHRO of Elmo Group of companies across Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. She has more than 20 years of experience leading business operations, compliance, and human resources in public, private, not-for-profit, academic, and government sectors. Monica, as an agilist, is committed to business and people growth at scale, and outside of the square thinker, experimenting and bringing people, practice, technology, and place together to achieve objectives and make magic happen. So, yesterday we started with Dr. John Woodrow, and he spoke about the need for agile design for designing future workplaces. Today, Monica will share some of the best practices and her experience of adopting agile methodology for Elmo software. Welcome, Monica, and over to you now.
Thank you very much. What a mouthful. It's quite interesting when you hear somebody talk about yourself and put all your heroes. I will be very blessed and thankful for the media team. Thank you, Fatima. I so love hearing your message. And Ashwatha, do you have a new budding HR practitioner or CEO in the world with you there in the session? I'm sure that there's lots of children, family members, and everything that are hearing some of those things. But yes, the future is all about agile, and the future is about who and how we can create that. And it is all about creating magic, because remember, people are magical. And so there's a big opportunity. Now, you have to forgive me because I am going to share my screen. Fingers crossed, I'm not going to break the bloody system. Hang on a minute. This one. Okay. Let me see and let me show how I'm going to go. Okay, let me present. if I can figure out how to present. There we go. Okay, there's me up on the screen. So, as you can see, I'm definitely not as neat and tidy these days. The hair's gotten a little bit messy. We've lived in life, and literally the whole coiffed hair and everything else. I can even comfortably tell you that I've got jeans and sneakers on, and I'm in a hotel in Adelaide, not in my hometown. And I've been 3 states this week. So I am Monica Watt. Thank you, Yasmin, that introduction. I think it is really great to be here with you today at People Matters Tech HR, the Futurist Forum. I seriously appreciate the invite. I do appreciate more so for the fact that we are getting back to the world of who we are as human beings, what can we deliver? And Sarah's highlights that, you know, that reset and reframe that we're working towards. We're in different situations. I've likened COVID in particular that we're all in the same sea. We're in different boats. Some are in tankers, some are in life rafts, you know, and there's also different elements of the sea that there's a wind swirl above us, and there are some different storms. So it is very mindful that understanding that we're not all in the same place, but we've all got different times and places. And I think that's where Agile really comes into it. And thank you very much for having me. But I think the first thing that we really should be talking about is, holy crap, what a year that we've had. The past 12 months in particular has certainly tested us at every possible level, as we can possibly imagine. At the same time, I think if we just look at 2020 itself, you know, we've got 2021 that we're part of the way through. There's a lot that's happening, but it was a critical year for HR's evolution and our success. In reality, HR were the first line responders to business success for COVID. And it was not just about, people were in survive mode. We were talking about, you know, Sarah highlighted this in hers, how we managed, whether it was moving to immediate remote, working with those that couldn't move to remote, furloughs, you know, pay cuts. There was so much that actually occurred that we actually demonstrated how agile we were. I genuinely believe HR status in the business has never been higher than anything that there is possible. And on the screen, you'll see Dave Ulrich's, and I love this about the fact that, you know, a crisis is a good thing not to waste. And I use this all the time, but in his quote, we need to look at what can we take away from COVID, you know, crisis, that we can work more effectively in the future, not today. We've become really good at today, and we're coming out. We've still got many different situations around the world as to how COVID's impacting us. But what we want to do is we don't just want to survive, we want to thrive. And so what do we need to do for that? So I do have a short presentation with you. You've got that on your screen today. Let me know if there is anything that's not cropping up, because I can see it all right. Can everybody see Dave Ulrich's screen? Yasmin, yes, got it there?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I know shortly after this, I'll have a Q&A session with Yasmin, but let me jump straight into it. So let me work. Yes. So let's quickly touch on why we need to consider making some changes in how we think and how we operate as a HR practitioner. What I'd ask you to do right now is just think about your own role. What can you do? What can you change? How much friction can you possibly remove? And what is something small? Because remember, as they say, just by changing 1 degree over the concurrence of time will have a magnitude of deviation, and you'll end up completely in a different location. We've got all of these elements that we need to get right in the business world. You know, some of them are listed actually on the right hand of your screen. And you've all heard of the word term VUCA. It's been done to death, actually is a military term, and we've used it for very many years, but we are definitely in uncertain times. And in the wake of COVID, the question that we should all be asking ourselves is, the traditional method of operating HR, is that going to ensure our future success? I don't believe so. Especially given the fact that we're in different worlds, we've got different COVID impacts that are occurring, we've got technology that's impacting us, we've got different commercial impacts, and also between solutions, systems, cloud technology, products, services. There is so much that is occurring. But I'll also add another element into the mix, which I think is something that is going to challenge us all. Perhaps the biggest barrier to innovation is time. And remember, we talk about time is money. We've all got the same amount of time. So what do we need to be doing? And time, I mean by in the sense that when we're asking to innovate, we're asking our employees to take time off their business as usual activities. We need them to be able to brainstorm and develop ideas, but also in terms of timeframes. Lead times are shorter. I think we've all heard of the term short-termism. You know, that's dominating strategic thinking at the moment. Times for channeling ideas into tangible business outcomes are tighter. So there's another question that I think that we need to be asked is, can we sacrifice innovation right now? And I want you to think about it, but I'm pretty sure if I was sitting in your rooms and I was with you, you'd all absolutely say, hands down, it's a resounding no, absolutely not. We need to be innovating all the time. So what we need to be asking is, the next question is, how are organizations then handling these pressures? Well, the recurring theme is agility. And so what do I mean by agile? What do we mean by agile? On the screen is a good overview which echoes some points that Yasmin made at the start. Sarah actually brought some of those elements in her conversation. But really, agile is a mindset. It's about achieving, not owning. And HR is very good at owning. And it's fundamentally, it's about for the better of the outcome. It's not about owning something. It's not saying this is my role, this is my seat, I own this seat. It's about what are we trying to achieve. On the right-hand side, there are some characteristics of Agile. And when we talk about Agile HR, we're usually talking about hypothesizing. We're talking about rapid decision-making, proactively responding to change instead of following prescriptive plans. We have built so many relationships. Remember, HR sits across the entirety of an organization. So which means your relationships across and through the organization are very deep and very important. That also means you've got champions, because remember, our job is to facilitate and enable success for other people through what we do. We facilitate and execute. We don't do. We encourage and help others to do. So with that in mind, you've got lots of champions. So consider piloting. We pilot with our champions, hypothesizing. Let's just take onboarding. Sarah raised something about onboarding to do with innovations, recruitment onboarding. Just thinking on that, if you're looking at onboarding and I'm going to test and change how my onboarding strategy is going to occur, you can hypothesize, right, by changing my onboarding process that is being less stepped and staged and bring other people into the actual activity. I hypothesize that I'm going to have more engagement. I'm going to build more relationships. The sentiment across the teams are going to be stronger. I'm going to have a successful employee from the time they start. And as we know, the first 30, 60, 90 days of an employee's career can set them up for success, or they're usually out the door. So I think there's a lot, but also transparent availability and access for information. And King Shook, this comes into yours. The increasing reliance of data and analytics is very important. You're able, through using agile methodologies, you're able to get data very quick, much quicker, that's in real time, that helps you to say, okay, I can make a decision now. I can put a freeze on that. I need to invest more in that. But we've got data immediately accessible to us. So to put it plainly, Agile itself is a better way to manage our volatility, become more adaptable and productive, which is where we're at right now, by designing solutions that are at the source rather than from the top. And when HR can operate like that, then we operate much more fluidly. Compare that to the traditional side, which is the old way that we've been working. And that's where I started in HR as well. I was very challenged in HR, which is waterfall. The challenge that we have with the waterfall methodology, it's very hierarchical. You know, it's top driven. So strategy, goals, outcomes are dripped down and they're cascaded down through the business. As they're cascaded down, as you know, it gets filtered a little bit and you lose some of the sentiment, you lose some of the input and information that you particularly need. It leads to overregulation, leads to micromanagement, and what it ultimately does is it helps and creates things to be unproductive. And more importantly is remembering in this model where you've got from start to finish queued out, you've got the timeline start to finish queued out, you've got it all planned out. At the beginning of the project is the least time that you actually know what you've got in front of you. Yet in the waterfall model, you're staging out everything that you have from start to finish. You plan, you start execution, you move forward, and then COVID happens. We can't plan for COVID. Well, we can now. But it's thinking, how do I do that? When you've got a whole framed practice and process, you're limiting yourself to be able to pivot. So you may be thinking that's all sounds really great in theory. And I can tell you now, it is great in theory, but it's also great in practice, given the fact that I'm on this journey. So on the screen, you can see a traditional versus agile approach, and I'll just let you reflect on those. But let me share with you some examples of agile HR, which you are probably already doing that you don't know that you're doing. COVID itself, you pivoting, getting your people off-site to remain productive, as well as retain as many as you can, all within a blink of your eye. Whether it was 2 weeks, 2 days, mine was 48 hours. We tested, and then 48 hours we went to full remote. I'm blessed. I'm obviously in a HR tech payroll, company, so which means I have the ability to have those insights and resources. But we did it inside 24 hours. Some took a little bit longer, and when you're looking at also resourcing people, it's something that we did very well. But let's look at recruitment. If you're considering how do you use cross-functional teams on all hiring requisitions, this means you're looking at the holistic issues inside the business to look at cross-boarding, secondments, boomerang employees. What can you do? How can you leverage, and what are some of the opportunities you've got? Using gig workers. We know gig workers are going to come, are rising up. We saw more than 50% entrepreneurship during COVID. So you're looking at short-term projects. People are wanting to do freelance assignments. Employees were given equal scope to help in the recruitment process. Referral schemes are critical. Who best to know who could work in your business than your current employees? So start leveraging them instead of using whole stage process of how your recruitment is. Learning is another one. The online learning modules that employees can access anytime, anywhere. We're online now. Whether this is a learning module or not, you've got the sense of engagement, and you can do that. Set yourself for success as well as competitive advantage by enabling learning to be accessible to your employees. Growth in coaching, mentoring, encouraging on-the-job learning. I mentioned Elmo and Ari completed a HR industry benchmark survey 2021, which again, it's available on our website. They actually stated the #1 challenge leading into this period was the upskill, cross-skill and reskilling of employees. And this is where learning is fundamentally important. So when you've got somebody who wants to know that you bring somebody on through their recruitment, their onboarding is brilliant, you want them to understand what their career opportunities, because you want them to stay with you, which means you want them to grow with you. So using artificial intelligence to generate learning advice. Monica, you want to become a product manager. What does it take? What courses do you need? My journey in understanding Agile, I did an Agile HR course. I joined the Agile HR community. I have Agile coaches in my team. And all the thing, create environments that are safe to fail, and practice makes progress. That's it. You just got to keep going with it. And I think the last thing, if I just want to reflect on agile methodologies, is look at your performance. Traditionally, we've had 12-month cycles. Most organizations have already shifted to that, to continuous feedback. The pulse surveys, simplifying the performance process. Instead of having reams and documentation to last forever that somebody's got to complete and takes more admin, why not try using star ratings? Why not try using color buttons as somebody walks out the door? M&Ms. Why not we use emojis everywhere. So why not use emojis? You see them at airports, going into how was your day? How was your flight? How was whatever else it is? Start thinking simpler. And I think separating the evaluation from the development discussion is critical. Remember, people are performing, and they're performing within the guardrails that you put with it. You've got outcomes and you've got objectives, and then you've got people's ability and the growth opportunity, and we need to be able to separate those. So I just want to keep that one on the high level. There is a persistent problem with HR's adoption with Agile. And it actually all stems from 2016, when there was a study that was done. There was risk-taking profiles from the HR profession to the general working population, so 2 different camps, and concluded that overall HR tends to take a more cautious approach than the average person. I want you to think about your own place, your own role. How many times have you thought that I'm the fun police? I'm the janitor. And how many things do you need to do that you have to think because you are the one that they come to try and fix everything? The study actually showed 1/3 of HR practitioners fit into 2 of the most cautious categories, prudent and wary. This result ended up in a focus on inattention to detail, compliance, ethical behaviours, and overall risk minimisation. These aren't negative traits. Indeed, they're very much needed for business success. So what we need to ask our question, though, if we're so focused on that and 1/3 of us are actually associated being prudent and wary, can HR truly adopt Agile? The majority of HR process related to compensation, performance appraisals, engagement surveys, workforce management, succession planning, they're designed on a yearly basis. Let's look at the old 1, 3, 5-year plans. They're gone. Yes, you need to make sure you've got your forecast. But we work by financial years, or you work by calendar years, either way, and every one of those has a quarter, and you really should be iterating and working to a quarterly with a rapid review. Because many HR functions still operate like they did in the 1990s, using talent practices that we cannot meet technological and customer demands, in this digital world that we're working in. So what I've heard more recently is HR is going what they call the term Agile Light, applying the general principles of Agile without adopting all the tech-heavy behaviours that sit inside the R&D and tech teams. What that actually means is we're moving away from rules and plan-based approach towards a simpler, faster model, much, much faster, driven by design thinking, which really has the employee at the heart. It has you at the heart of it. And the whole innovation process becomes key. So there's a lot more that's involved. I am on an Agile journey. I know there was only a very quick snippet that I've got. And I'm constantly growing and changing. I'm constantly curious. I don't know it all. I never will. Remember, things are changing absolutely every day. But if I can give you one piece of advice that comes from this, is there is no one way to begin Agile HR. It's just simply to begin. So I think we're out of time, Yasmin, for my prezzo. And I think we've now got a Q&A that's coming in. But let me try and get out of this and see how I can stop my sharing.
Thank you.
And
thank you so much for telling us what Agile actually means, how HR function can become Agile, how Agile is the now and future of workplaces. So thank you for sharing that.
I thank you very much. I do get on my soapbox, and I do try to keep it very, very as close to the slides as possible.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. So now moving on to a few questions that I have for you. I'd also request audience members, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat section, or you can unmute yourself and you can say, that you want to ask a question to Monica. So we could do that also. But let me begin. So my first question to you, Monica, would be, how do you think Agile methodology scores over traditional management approaches for business and HR?
Really good question. It's a meaty question as well. Remembering Agile HR is about transforming how organisations operate, whether it's hire, develop, maintain, retain, grow, as well as become competitive in the market. And what that is different is it's the methodology. It's using the methodology that's really about hypothesizing, testing and iterating without committing all the time and resources at the same time. which we would usually go in and say, right, I need X amount of money to complete this particular activity, and this is where we don't know everything at the start. Remembering, I want to implement a piece of technology, and I need X amount of hours, but that doesn't take into account that I've got people moving. I haven't actually factored in all the parts of the solution that I need. Do I really need all the solution right now? And this is where cloud-based technology that is iterating is really good over the top of versions. Versions means you're stuck with what it is that you've got. Iterating means I can change with what it is that I'm doing. And if you want to reflect on a little bit, we've all managed projects, you know, whether it's at work, whether it's a wedding, anything really, and we plan to the nth degree and we expect it to work. And in the perfect world, without impact of people, resources, systems, technology, money, that might be the case, it could work. But this is why it comes down to being more curious about what do I not know right now and what am I willing to test. And what you want to do is test theories and affirm what you're seeing early and stop. You must stop when you're not seeing the results that you want. Whereas when you're looking at the traditional, you're waiting to get to the end and then you turn around and then you do a post-mortem, or you do an analysis, you do a review, and you just go, oh, we need to change that and we need to do that. And you've already found that you've probably, your point of deviation when you started at 1% means you could be about 47% away from where you originally thought you were going to land. So Agile enables you to deliver small slices of that value and test and get data within a very short space of time, whether it's 4 weeks, whether it's 6 weeks, instead of what ends up being a 12-week, 6-month, 12-month, and you've got scope creep that goes out, you've got budget creep, then you've got a budget freeze that occurs. If you can show value straight off the bat, then you're either saving money or you're investing money in the right way.
Great. I think that's really nice. I think, yes, Agile helps you to do that rather than waiting for the long-term result and then seeing that, oh, you might have just failed. So that does save time, save money, everything. So thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Yasmin.
Great. Also, Monica, tell us, how has Elmo adopted this methodology in HR specifically? And what aspects of Agile have worked well for your team and Elmo more broadly?
Yeah. Now, this is exciting. So I became exposed to Agile. Obviously, Elmo software has been operating the cloud since the get-go. And so we obviously, our R&D team operates through that. So I was blessed to work with our R&D team in 2019 through a restructure. And I brought in a consulting firm to help me move the team to enable our next iteration of scale. We'd listed as on the Australian Stock Exchange. We'd relocated, we'd tipped over, I think, 200 employees. And how could we really understand what the end-to-end cycle versus of both a customer, remember, of a customer, of an employee at the same time? Because remember, if you've got a brilliant customer experience and a brilliant employee experience, that's nirvana. That's the cash nirvana for a business. So we've got a product that's iterating. Did we have customer service that we were iterating? Was I able to bring talent in that was able to take us to that next iteration? So that analysis and that restructure really gave me insights that I gleaned to unpack how Agile could be applied to all aspects of the business, not just in HR. So as highlighted in my prezo, I attended the Agile HR course, which I'm now certified in. Joined the communities, read books. I read books. My gosh, I read tech books. I read every type of book. But because there's not a great deal on Agile HR, it's more about what can you apply and what could I apply about the different way of thinking. I adopted elements of Agile in 2019 with practice and learning, and I found ways to improve HR by adopting those methodologies. I then talked at length with my team over the time and offered to bring in a coach to help us train. And this is where it probably lands really well, is because I also have the Agile coaches in my team. And that's something I probably need to clarify. So I'm the chief HR, but I also manage business operations, the back end business. So I manage IT, facilities, admin, and my Agile coaches as well. And what that enables me to do is to triangulate where all the resources and understanding the pain from all layers of the business. And so having those coaches, or having a coach, first of all, I did bring an external out. First of all, let me be clear. I brought an external in to take my team through some professional development over the Christmas break we just recently had. And my coaching team, who are coaches for R&D, however, the implementation, the expectation within the next 24 months, I want to move to Biz Scrum. And what that means, I can talk a little bit later about that. But they then needed to understand what HR's journey was as a non-technical team to come in to Agile. So they actually went through our training as well. And so what aspects have we implemented? We use Kanban boards. My team we run a Scrum on Monday morning, and we go through our OKRs. We run a sprint every month that runs for our week. It runs from Wednesday through to Tuesday. You can imagine if you took a whole team out from Monday to Friday, they'd be in fetal position. The business, that is, not the team. So we actually make sure we've got bookends of time on each side of the week that the teams can be accessed to. The sprint team is made up of 4 to 5 of my team members across the portfolio. And that could be whether it's HR, L&D, my talent team, IT. So in the most recent sprint that I had IT, my executive assistant, L&D, and HR, a HR member. And so the sprints are about solving a business problem. And this comes back to one of the challenges that I talked about in the presentation, the challenges of HR taking on, because there's some perceptions that we own a seat, we own a job, we own a task, we own having to unpack and rebuild your mindset to say we're achieving an outcome. So our most recent, the industry benchmark survey, which talked about the cross-skilling and upskilling, was the priority. So what we did in the most recent sprint was look at our capability framework. And we thought, if we can't cross-skill and we can't upskill and we can't reskill, because we've got 100,000 here in Australia and New Zealand, we've got 100,000 skilled migrant shortage, then how do I know what my capability inside my business is? Yes, people are doing their job, they're performing really well, but how can I second people? How can I cross-board people? How can I promote people when I'm looking at the resources that I've got? So we ran a sprint that looked at the capability framework. That framework then was leaning into understanding, well, we solved another problem. Well, I'm not saying another problem because it wasn't a problem. We actually found a better solution for our recruitment, because we could then map and analyze the grading of people coming into a role, whereas we thought we were doing it purely for just the business and their teams, and to know, well, this skill maps into this team, which maps into that team, which can be used into that project. We then found that we could use it in the recruitment team, and it's just been brilliant. And that all happened from a week-long sprint. I think if you're looking at other particular things that some of the challenges that I did have, which I've led to, which is overcoming the mindset that if I'm sprinting, I'm not working, right? Because we're so used to doing business as usual. Yes. And the work and effort is greater in solving a business problem in real time that's going to have material impacts. Then most businesses will start working over, over months that have lost momentum. So helping my team to understand that they are working, but they're working on something that's bigger than them, that what they believe, that I think was a very big challenge. But a week in depth is more valuable, knowing whether there's more investment and the outcome is intended than a protracted 12-month project. So I think they're some of the biggest things that I've learned and some of the opportunities that we've had.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Actually, Pia Marie has a question related to that, which is what metrics proved useful to say you were achieving the desired outcome?
Really good question. Again, some comes to quality, depends on if you're in my experienced team. So let me look at talent. So talent, we will forecast based on data, let's say the interview process, so the quality of candidate. And the quality is hard to measure, but the quality is measured against a grade. So let's say I'll talk about my R&D team as an example. So you've got multiple grades. You're bringing in somebody from that is coming in, let's say, for a grade 3. You do a technical assessment, you do a behavioural assessment, you have multiple streamed interviews. They are graded against a matrix. From that matrix, you then determine the skills assessment that that person has come forward with. You then will analyse based on this, and sorry, I'm taking a long-winded process, Maria, the amount of candidates that you'll get on a specific job application, so a job board that comes in, how many hits does it get based on the candidate? How many are successful going into interview? How many are successful going through technical testing? And then based on that, looking at the system, looking at our workforce plan, because we still do have workforce plan, although it's quite transient on a 4-month to an annual rotation. It's saying based on the opportunity for this skill set, again, coming back to my capability framework, this person demonstrates, let's say, 7 out of the 10 skills that I need, but they hold 2 other skill sets that I have that are required in my capability framework. What's the opportunity to hire that person? So based on job, based on title, based on activity, based on skill set, we can then determine and I'm not going to say rating, but we'll talk about the success rate of an employee starting the business. It's probably a convoluted way, and I really should have probably had a better example, but I'm definitely happy to share some bigger examples, afterwards.
Great. No, thanks. I think we can move on to our next question, and maybe you'll remember that example then, because even Fatima has been asking for already hired staff, what metrics is used then? So, they're following. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one's actually really good when it comes to secondments. It talks about people movement. So people moving, secondments, cross-boarding, recruitment, the internal movements. Also, we've also got study breaks that occurs as well. So when you've got the opportunity of, based on learning and development, right? So we have an emergent leader program that we run. So it's a learning development program inside our emergent leader program, which is available to everybody inside the business. However, there are certain stages of that, and they are progressed. First of all, one is earmarked by an executive that says, I believe this person, through my overarching observation inside the business, should be put on that program. The other ones are nominated by their managers that will come into it. And so there are things in there. So I run my international Toastmasters. Anybody who's in, or Toastmasters International, anybody who's part of the program has to learn communication skills, all those sorts of things. What we then talk about is whether it's a secondment that moves into a permanent position, whether it is a permanent position that is then closed off to another position. We then look at time to skill. So from the Emergent Leaders Program, when they have a mentor, because they're also allocated a mentor, there is an analysis that is done. So we use some Gallup strengths as well as DISC profiling, and we do them through the start and through towards the ending as well. Through the mentor program, through the ancillary programs, through the learning and development programs, we then survey managers. So we survey managers before they start, we survey the employee before they start, we survey the manager and the employee midway through, we then survey them at the end. Then we look at what changes of whether it's behaviour, whether it's close of tickets, whether it's faster activity, whether it's better response rate, customer experience rate. There are many things that we work to say by investing in this employee via them doing this program, that they are faster, they're delivering quality work, and they're also problem solving. Because when you're looking at Agile in particular, and the Emergent Leader Program, which is Agile, can I tell you, it means they're self-organizing. They don't need to be told, they'll go and ask. So we now ask, did this person come and talk to you? Have they spoken to you? And you'll find that the conversations that are happening are far greater than somebody being told. We have 14% cross-boarding, and at the moment I have 15 boomerang. So our boomerang employees are very important to add to there. We can't always give somebody what they need. They need to leave to become stronger to come back. And that's probably something that's, we use that analysis all the time. And we focus on two things. One is the technical skill and one is the behavior, right? Because remember, it's like, and I'm going to deviate a bit, you can have brilliant jerks and you have jerks who think they're brilliant, and then you've got brilliant people, right? You've just got to figure out which one they all fit in the bucket, and how do you actually work with each one of them to try and create some of that self-perception.
Great. That's a great analogy. Thank you so much, Monica, for answering that question. I'll quickly, in the interest of time, quickly move on to our next question. So, becoming agile is not an easy journey. So, what are some of the new skills that HR needs to learn as it gears up to adopt agile methodology?
Okay. It's actually, Sarah brought it up in hers, and part of it is about understand your essential skills, right? Agile is about being curious. It's about creating an environment that it's okay, you're safe to fail. And HR in general either need to know all the answers or need to look like they have all the answers. It's also letting go. So defining what done looks like. We say we're going to get to an end of a project. So really understanding what an outcome of done looks like, and letting go of what is close to being perfect before going out. Prioritization. Really good example that I can give you is my team. We all sat down in the first sprint. So I'm the product owner when I come into the sprint. So I don't engage in the sprint. I come in and out of the sprint and see where we're going, and then I give my feedback. When we first went through, we did the whole user mapping across and we prioritized on the Kanban the entire priorities of what needed to be done. And my team deprioritized all of my projects, every single one of them. And it's understanding that there's no hierarchy in Agile. It is self-organizing teams, and it is decentralized decision making. So communication is going to be key. Understanding predictability, having an aptitude and being able to respond to change. Parking your ego at the door is going to be very, very important, and celebrating the success as a team rather than meaning the broader team, meaning the business team. It's going to be very, very different. It's very hard because HR and people tend to own a seat. Well, and they think that what they're doing, business as usual, is really important. The other thing is remembering that Agile, you've got business as usual. So let's use the 80-20 rule. R&D might use research and development, might do 80% is their Agile and 20% is BAU, so their administration tasks and everything else. On the flip side, HR is likely to be the other way around. 80% of our time is BAU and 20% is Agile. Because remember, Agile is continuous improvement, right? So every time you do some impact here, you're going to impact here. So I hope I answered that question, because there's a lot in there.
Yes, there is. I think curiosity, I think the ability to respond to change, the ability to leave your ego out at the door. I think those are some very important qualities. And I think not only HR professionals, I think everybody needs to have. So thanks for sharing that, Monica.
Yes.
Yes. So quickly, just moving on, I'll just ask my last and final question to you, Monica, before we move on to our next session. Can you describe any challenges you personally faced when it was the chance to adopt agile, elements at Elmo, especially, or any piece of advice also you'd like to give to the people who are listening to you right now? What approach can they take to adopt agile?
Yeah, adjusting the mindset and letting go of control is the biggest thing that I had. I'm a control freak. I need to know everything and a part of that, and understanding that I didn't have to that. I don't need to know that. Trust that you set the guardrails of what you're expecting. I think another is expecting to have the answers and creating an environment that is safe to fail. To the point that it is celebrated. As you stop investing when you know something is not going to achieve the outcome, that means you've saved loads of money as well as time, right? And you've given yourself time back. And the piece of advice, just start. There's no reason to not start. Just start. Ask questions. We're all on a journey. There aren't many of us, aren't many Agilists out there. It's new. We're getting there. Just do. Connect with me and I'll learn with you.
Absolutely. I think I love that part. Yes, it is about just start, because as you said, that it encourages you to fail. There's nothing wrong. It's about continuous improvement. Agility is all about learning on the go. And I think, it's safe to, as everybody's pointing out, even in our chats, that it's safe to fail is the best lesson that one can have. HR is too fixed on its mindset. So that changes, adjusting your mindset, letting go of things, having that,
Yeah.
changing yourself with change that's coming along. I think very important points. Thank you so much. And on
Thank
that
you.
note, yes, thank you, Monica. And that note, that was all the time we had for this session, but it was great learning from you. I think,
Sorry, I talk a lot.
no, I think that's lovely. I think Elmo is on a really progressive journey when it comes to agility, and I hope all of us can learn more from you on that in future as well. And from whatever we heard today, I think that was good enough for us to say, let's start. It's time to start. Let's not make it later than that. So thank
And
you once again, Monica. It was a great session.
Yasmin, I'll also share with you via email for those that are online some of the metrics that we do use and how I have them mapped out in my OKRs. I'll share that as well.
That'll be
All right.
great. Actually. Great takeaway from everyone. Thank you, Monica. Thank you
Thanks,
once
Tim.
again.
Bye. Cheers.
Thank you so much. All right, then now let's move on to our last session of the Futurist Forum, which is a fireside chat on managing future workplace experience. And to present this session, we have with us Alex Bagnoff, Group Executive, Transformation Communications and People, Telstra, and Esther Martinez, CEO and Editor-in-Chief, People Matters. In her past career, Alex occupied the position of Executive Director, Organizational Development at Telstra Corp Limited, Director Human Resources and Corporate Affairs at Pacific National Holdings Private Limited, and General Manager Organizational Effectiveness at Coles Myer Limited. She received an undergraduate degree from the University of Melbourne. Welcome, Alex. Thank you so much for joining us. And over to you, Esther, for this moderating this fireside chat.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Yasmin. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, Alex. How are you feeling today?
Very well, Esther. Thanks.
Wonderful. So it's great to have you with us. And I think the context Monica set up for the group was really, really meaningful for this new conversation that we're going to have today on workplace experience. And just to connect the dots for everyone in this call, Monica spoke about the uncertainty and the difficulty of complexity that we are dealing with. And I think when it comes to experience itself in the new context of hybrid, that's probably a space that none of us have any experience from the past. And really we're entering this new definition of what workplace experience is all about with this new fresh pair of eyes, really, because we are experimenting and we really need that agile mindset that Monica was speaking about. So no better context to start this conversation. So Alex, what I would like to start a little bit about setting the context about some of the trends that you're seeing on workplace experience and even the definition of experience. Because we probably pre-COVID, we used to think of experience in a particular way, but now I feel that even that definition has changed. So tell us a little bit about how do you define experience and what are some of the trends that you think are really critical to consider?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question about defining what experience is. And I think the way we've chosen to think about it is that it's about choice. So it's not about how you're going to set up an office, or it's not about moving everyone to work from home. It really is about creating an environment where we respect and understand diversity and people's need for personal choice and personal arrangements. So when we are looking at that future workplace experience, and like many, we're talking about hybrid, one of the things I suppose I'm finding interesting and challenging, and I think many workplaces are grappling with, is I think we are trying to overly define what workplace experience is. We are trying to come up with a set of rules which tell people exactly what it looks like. It's this many days in the office, it's working from these hours to this hours, it's got all this structure around it. And we've chosen to go a different way, which is actually talk about choice, and that the future workplace experience is one where you can individualize where you work, how you work, and when you work. And I think that is going to be the new definition of experience, is that personal choice on the how, where, and when of work.
So how's been the journey, Alex, of what you've seen in your leadership team to really shift from that mindset of, we need to control what's happening, and, we are accountable to our shareholders. And at the end of the day, that puts a lot of pressure at the board level, at the leadership level, and moving from there to say, well, you know what, we have to trust our teams, we need to trust our employees, and we know they will do the right thing. So we don't need to define everything. So it's a huge journey. Tell us a little bit about that.
It is. It's a massive journey, and I think different companies are in a really different place on this issue. And I can see it very much across the market in which we operate. How many companies are looking to get their people back into the office because they need them to be productive? And I'll come back to that because it's a very interesting mindset and has real consequence, I think. For us, the part of the reason the journey, I think, has been a little bit easier is that we were already, on average, had our people working from home 2 days a week pre-COVID. So we already actually had a high work from home culture. We had deeply embraced all roles flex as part of our ways of working. Now, having said that, I still think there were many leaders and many people who didn't believe in it and didn't believe that people would be as productive. And then, like everyone else, one day we woke up and we had to suddenly embrace working from home because there was no other choice. Necessity is a wonderful thing. And so we moved to a work from home, and we saw our people not miss a beat. In fact, the biggest concern I had over the last year was burnout, people working too many hours, people not being able to define where the boundaries of work and life started and stopped. It wasn't about whether they were sort of sitting up on the couch watching television. It was really actually caring for them. So I think the first thing is we need to challenge our assumptions about human behaviour. Most people have always shown up at work to do a good job. That's just the majority always have. And people who didn't want to do a good job or didn't want to work hard or weren't productive were able to do that in an office. I think we've all worked with people who are really good at not doing very much, but they came to work every day. You could see them. They were sitting at a desk. So I think the thing we're really trying to challenge in our leadership team and in our workplace is breaking those myths about what productivity looks like. It is measured by what you deliver, not whether you do it from an office, not whether you do it from 9 to 5, not whether you do it full-time or part-time. So that's the first one. But you talked about trust a moment ago, and I think this is one of the most important issues that employers have to embrace. To have a workforce you're not willing to trust, I think, is going to be really challenging for employers going forward. The last year has changed employee expectations, and it's changed the way we think about work. And I have watched employers in our environment who are going out now and saying, we expect you back in the office. And they are breaching that relationship of trust with their employees. And what I'm actually seeing is a negative consequence on engagement and a negative consequence on productivity. So as a company, we have made a very clear choice that there is no moment where we're going to tell people they've got to come back to the office. What we will do is tell them when there's great reasons to come and connect with people. So a celebration, a collaboration event, give the office purpose, give it meaning, and make people want to be there. Don't tell them to be there.
Wonderful. And I'm going to stay on that track a little bit, but I'm inviting everyone, and I can see some comments from Farhan already on the chat, but inviting everyone, as you're listening to Alex, is this something that triggers a thought or a question? Please do feel free to type it on the chat. We will take it as we go through the conversation. So Alex, let me invite you to share a little bit more about if we're defining experience in the context of choice and in the context of trust and enablement. Now, what is the role that we have as HR professionals to create an environment where people can flourish? Because choice can also be very overwhelming. And how do we make sure that people are having the infrastructure, ecosystem, inclusive culture, everything that's needed so then I can show up at my best in this new defined workplace?
Yeah, there's probably three things that immediately come to mind. I mean, there's many, but the first is you do need the right setup and the right tools and tech. And that's, in some ways, it's the easiest bit because it's something I can go and get. I can set it up on my desk. We've all got really good at it. But you do actually need that, and making sure that as a company you're really clear on enabling people through tools and technology. So for example, in our workplace, we made a choice, and again, every business different, we made a choice that our employees can go into our purchasing system. They can pick a package which might range from, I just want a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, through to, I want a stand desk, I want a chair. They can set themselves up, and we make sure that they've got the right equipment and ergonomics to work effectively at home if that's what they choose. So employers and HR really need to be thoughtful about putting the right infrastructure around this in the first place. I think the second is really thinking about being clear on defining what flexibility does mean for you. And when I say defining, it doesn't mean what we traditionally think of as defining, which is it's 2 days a week at home or whatever. We have issued a new all roles flex policy, which we're happy to share. In fact, one of my teams already posted it on LinkedIn. And it talks about the choices you need to work through between the employee and the manager. And this is the importance of setting up a new social contract with who you work with. And I think HR has a really important role to make sure that there's the right policy, the right sort of setting organisationally, so that the right conversations are set up. Because as a manager, if I'm expecting one thing and you're expecting another, then we will have a disconnect and we'll have problems in our relationship and expectations of each other. So the questions that are asked, the things to explore, our policy is all about that. It's not about the rules of what flexibility has got to look like. It's how do I establish a new social contract? That's the third. The next one is leadership. So tools and tech is important, got to have it. But hybrid working or the future workplace experience is all about leadership. It probably always was all about leadership, but it never more than it is now. Leaders have to become very good at actually setting clear expectations and performance standards with their people. They should have always been good at it, but they need to be even better at it. They need to become really good at creating connections and taking the time to understand their people, and not just understand the person in the workplace, but understand the whole person. Do they have aging parents? Do they have children? What are they dealing with? What's going on in their world? And the role as leader to make sure that you create a truly inclusive environment where all voices are heard, regardless of whether people are at home or in the office, is really critical. So as HR, you've got to be really thinking about what sort of leaders are you developing and training, which ones are you selecting, which ones are you rewarding, and making sure you get that right, because you can have the best policy, you can have the best tech, but without the right leaders, I really think the future of workplace experience as a hybrid experience is going to be very challenged.
So on the leadership part, Alex, I think as you said it, and it just resonates so much, I'm sure, with all of us in this call, that, you know, that was always important. I think the role of a leader of setting expectations, creating connections, and you mentioned as well about creating an inclusive environment. It's not new. What is urgent, what I'm hearing you say it's urgent, is that in the office environment, you always have, maybe by, maybe indirectly you were getting that from somewhere else. Even if your manager wasn't really doing that, you could find some clues and some cues someone else, and you could navigate. But now, that role just becomes so critical. So I'm worried about, what do we do with that, maybe a group of leaders or managers that actually are just not able to transform the way of working into that critical. And I feel like there may be many of us in that call that says, well, I do have a set of leaders that are actually not able to to shift into that mindset. So what are you doing to, you know, select, identify, but also taking care of leaders who may actually be individual contributors who landed into manager roles just because they were high performers, and that's a reality.
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. I think there's a couple of things. I think there's some more traditional answers, which are making sure that we have the right training, the right development, the right coaching, and all of the supports in place, and giving people a chance to change and succeed is first. But actually something that we've done, and it links actually a little bit to the last session, we have flipped our entire organisation into a full, what we call agile at scale. So there is no BAU and agile. We are fully agile in our construct, which means you've got leaders of work who are the group owners, and you've got leaders of people who are the chapter leads. And one of the things that really served us well as we went into COVID is we had selected our chapter leads not for being technical experts, not for being necessarily the highest performer in its traditional sense. It was selecting people who had the right mindset, the right behaviours to be leaders of people, and really valuing that skill set equal to the leaders of work. And I think that is one of the shifts organisationally. And when we did that, it actually enabled some people who were amazing performers and great technical leaders to fall under a chapter and no longer have to lead people and still contribute at the same level in the same way, but not lead people. And so that can be a really good enabler, but it depends whether obviously you're structured that way of going down that path. But having a look at how you can use that group and chapter logic and really think about how do you define the role of leading people, I think is one way that HR can think about how it gracefully manages the change of getting the right people in those leadership jobs, which was always important, never more important.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm sure for some of those segments is actually a relief that, you know, like I'm just feeling so much happier now because I can focus on, you know, deep work, and I can focus on, you know, other aspects of the business. Yeah.
And we're finding, you know, it's really showing up in our results with our workforce. We've got over, you know, it's sort of about 98% of our people who feel more connected to their teams today than they did 18 months. We know that people who are in a chapter construct, their employee engagement is higher because there is someone who's really thinking about what work they get deployed to, what learning and development they do, making sure that there's regular learning built into their annual cycle. So many of the things that I think HR has struggled to get organisations and leaders to adopt, we've been able to weave in far more effectively.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much, Alex. So I'm going to invite Caroline. You had a question that you wanted some more insights on. Would you like to just unmute yourself, and please go ahead, Caroline.
Sure. I actually think that you might have just answered that to a certain extent. I was just almost paraphrasing what Esther, you had said to Alex, was around the challenge of helping top leaders to recognise that their current way of thinking is actually negatively impacting the ability to make the workplace experience more favourable for all of the staff and so on. So I was intrigued with some of the insight that you shared around how to best do that and how to shift the mindset.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. We were talking about this the other day in our leadership team, because we can see lots of companies alongside us taking a different approach, which is, you know, we're going to tell people to come back to the office. We're going to get back to normal. And what we're seeing sort of from a data perspective is that their office occupation is generally not increasing any more than ours is, and we're not telling anyone to come in. And I think one of the other things is actually using data to help leaders stop and think for a minute about what they're achieving, because we're not seeing people who are taking a very sort of authoritarian approach and potentially really breaching that trust situation, actually getting the results they think they want. So that's the other place I would go, is look at your occupancy rates, look at your engagement rates, actually pulsing your people and see what's going on, I suspect many leaders might start to discover that the data will challenge their mindsets. It will take time, but it will certainly be confronting information for them.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Caroline. So, Alex, you mentioned about some data to look at, and how that data can just give you some insight about behavior. And I'd love to invite you to tell us a little bit about the role of listening, especially now that you're open up and increasing choice. So the opportunity to actually listen and get insights from data on whether we are on the right track, what help is needed, what support is needed. How are you using listening actually as a very effective way to keep defining what to do for the organization?
Yeah, good question, Esther. And look, I'm not sure anything we're doing is amazing here. I think many other organisations are doing the same things. But like many, we have moved away from the big sort of annual employee engagement survey. We went to monthly, but we've now moved back to quarterly pulsing, which means that I get on my desktop every single quarter the insights. Actually, because of my job, I get it for the whole organisation, but I get my team too, which gives me the traditional engagement questions, but it gives me a couple of other things. So we've chosen to supplement our engagement or experience pulse with leadership data. So my team every single quarter get to do a couple of things. They get to rate me on whether I am living up to what we talk about as our leadership practices. And they're pretty basic, like, do I have a monthly or a weekly one-on-one with them? What are my practices in line with what I promised them? And they also get to give me a net promoter score. And so they get to rate me as to whether they would recommend me as a leader to others. And as a leader, that's a pretty powerful piece of feedback. So I get leadership insights and they tell me what I need to stop, start and continue in that space. And last but not least, we've been asking supplementary questions, which tell us about workplace experience, what's working for people, what's not working for people, and what they need from us. And that influences and informs what we talk about as our future workplace experience roadmap, which we publish to the organisation. And they can see, when they knew we were going to release the work at home toolkit, they knew when we were going to enable our meeting rooms with new technology to enable better hybrid meetings. And so they can see exactly what's coming. We've built and developed our own workplace app, which lets them book their desk, but it lets them book their desk near the people that they want to be. So they can come into what we call neighbourhoods, because I don't want to just come to the office. I want to come to the office to see the people I really want to see, and make sure they're there in the same place at the same time. So we can keep developing that through engagement with our people, Esther.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And Alex, as I'm hearing you with the humility to say, well, we haven't got everything right, but it's just all different things that we are trying and doing. And I think for many listening to us would also be interesting to learn from you, how do you adopt some of these new things? Like, for example, what you mentioned about leadership data. And that's a big cultural shift to tell your manager, well, will I recommend you as a manager? Many of us will feel like, I'm going to give my manager a 10 because I don't want to be, I don't want to be retaliated after that. So how do you make sure that even when you see that all the team members are giving everyone a 10 and everyone, is that also something that gives you insights that, is there something going wrong? How do you identify that people are truly using these tools to improve and not to tick the box? And that's a huge mindset shift we have to drive as well.
Absolutely, you are spot on. So when we first introduced it, we didn't allow quite the level of granular reporting, so we kept it at a slightly more aggregate level, just so people would start getting used to it. Because I think you've got to be thoughtful about where you're starting from and how confronting and how people are going to feel about that data, and what inadvertent behaviours you might drive. And then once we did open up that granular reporting, so I can have a look at my whole functions result, then I can click and filter by my direct reports, and I can see exactly what the 10 people who report to me rated me, not by individual, but as an aggregate. I can see it, which is, you know, a little confronting some days. But when we did that, we did look at which teams had variable results versus which teams had all 100%ers, because it tells us something about their culture, because I don't believe it.
Yeah.
There's, I don't know how many teams if you've got 3,000 people, there is going to be some variance in the leaders, right? There just is. And when I look at that and see it's 100% across every single leader, I say we've actually got a culture where people aren't speaking up, where they're not raising issues. And that actually prompts us to go and have conversations and to start exploring and disrupting that culture a bit to get underneath it. You know, equally, we go and have a look at which teams have really bad scores. And then we have a different intervention that's required. So good or bad data always tells you something if you choose to look.
Yeah, wonderful. If you choose to look at it with courage, and you choose to act on it with courage as well. Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. So I'm going to invite Farhan to bring on the question about fixed mindsets. Farhan, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Esther.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi, Alex. Farhan here from Nokia Malaysia. Great sharing on the issues that we have you have covered before, and I think pretty much you have covered what I am actually asking. Caroline's question also. You mentioned something about providing the data, good or bad data. There's something to tell behind it, the story behind it. It will take, of course, time to understand and to act on it. But sometimes I feel that it can be a little bit too late. Like, for example, exit interviews are quite underrated, I would say. So it is mostly too late for us to rectify for that person who's leaving, but maybe for the incoming cases. But I also want to understand your take on data interpretation, and also maybe you can share a practice in your organization on this.
Sorry, I missed the very last sentence there.
The data interpretation, when you mentioned about interpreting good or bad data, and Telstra, the practice in Telstra.
Yeah, really, thank you. A couple of things. I mean, one, we have increasingly embraced the importance of good data analytics and insights, and actually also using AI in terms of actually getting underneath some of our data to be able to draw better insights from it. So actually, I think particularly HR needs to invest in its data analytics skills. It has, you may have teams that are really strong on it. Most of the teams I've worked with over the years have not. We in my team, we're really investing. We have a data analytics and insights part of a chapter that we're building that capability, because we see it as one of the most powerful engines that we can actually make sure that we do the most productive work possible, because we use insights to decide what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it. So we are able to also cross-populate data in terms of what's going on in our offices during the sort of peak of COVID sort of lockdowns in Australia. One of the opportunities we took is for some of the techs that were able to be in the office, put in place actually monitors so that we could start tracking density and movement in our offices, so that we would get a better feel for what flow, how were people using meeting rooms, what sort of density were certain parts of our building getting, so that we could think about how do we need to redesign our offices as people came back in and we saw how they were using it. We could design actually workplaces to better meet their needs rather than having to ask people all the time. We've got that continuous data using sort of IoT sensors through our office. So we do that. The other thing, this is really old-fashioned data collection, because new tech is really cool, but old-fashioned is really good too. And one of the things that we do is we've got about 300 what we call influencers across the business. So they're a selection of really respected people at all levels, all the way through our business, that myself and the other executive meet with every quarter. And we have an open conversation with them, and we ask them what's on their minds, what's going on in the organisation, what's the good, what's the bad, what do we need to be understanding as the executive team. And it's one of the most powerful conversations, and I haven't found a technology replacement for it yet. Human beings are really valuable data as well.
Wonderful.
I understand. Wonderful.
Thank you.
So much.
Thanks, Farhana, and thanks, Alex, for bringing both the human way of collating stories cannot really be replaced with any technology. So we have another 5 minutes, and I want to make sure we cover one. I will close by inviting Alex to give us a closing word of advice, one thing to start, one thing to stop. But before I do that, I think the concept of well-being has come to the fore. I think as I'm reading the fear of long COVID, people still having effects of the illness and not really even being able to identify, and that affecting their productivity and their their engagement. So how are you looking at well-being in a holistic way to really enable people who are at different stages of how they've been affected, really?
Yeah, I think well-being has become such a huge topic in workplaces over the last year and before, but not to the same extent it is now. We started looking at a range of things, and again, from very humanistic solutions all the way through to technology. So we have ramped up the events that we run, where people can join seminars, whether it's on how to actually manage caring for elderly parents, whether it particularly, which many of you would probably relate to, we had a lot of people who were working from home, their kids were schooling from home, they're trying to manage all of those dimensions of their life. I think it was one of the things that impacted a lot of people's well-being, certainly here, was that pressure cooker that sort of the home became. And so we did a lot of education, a lot of support processes. We've really dialed up how people can access third-party counselling, various support in that way. We've also really increased, I suppose, normalising the discussion of mental health, because it isn't just about physical health. In fact, the silent issue is mental health, because you can't see it. And it's really hard to see over a screen. So we've been doing a lot to normalise and bring that conversation out in our workforce. So we've had some fabulous members of our workforce who've been willing to tell their story of mental health challenges, particularly through the COVID period, or the intense sort of lockdowns, which we don't have anymore. And they told their stories in a very raw, honest way. And what it does is it makes it okay for people to reach out. And I think that is one of the most important things, is normalising that many of us have bad days. Many of us deal with mental health challenges at different points in our lives. And the first thing you can do is ask for help. And so we've used that. And then at a really practical level, which I'm sure some of you guys are doing as well, a lot of the workplace tools let you monitor and get some analytics on how people are working, how many hours, the sort of exchanges, and doing little things like build into your calendars that an hour meeting is automatically set for 50 minutes. So that if that happens automatically, you don't even have a choice of it, and therefore you've got that inbuilt 10 minutes where you're not on a video straight again. I mean, I don't know about you, I'm finding myself apologising for being late to a meeting when I'm seconds late.
I agree. I agree. And I don't want to be the cause of you having to apologize for the next meeting. So we're going to invite you, Alex, and it's been a fascinating conversation. And I know we had many other things to cover and we couldn't cover everything we wanted, but I think whatever we covered was with so much of depth and so much of authenticity that it was just so meaningful. So closing words of advice, Alex, as we define the experience for the future. And many of us are in different stages of the business, maturity, different cultures. But what do you leave us with in terms of one thing to start, one thing to stop, as we are reimagining that experience in the future?
It's actually it's the one thing.
It's the one thing.
And it is actually stop trying to go back to normal, because that's gone. And I think as soon as organisations, particularly HR, embrace that the job isn't to find a way back, the job is to find a way forward. And that's going to look different for every single one of us and every single organisation. But the one thing I'm really sure of, it's not what we knew a year ago. It's something we haven't imagined yet. It's something we haven't experienced yet. And have an open mind to what's possible rather than craving for the past, because it's gone.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. So Yasmin, I would invite Pia, with your permission, to give us a little bit of a quick summary before we give it over to you.
Absolutely, please. Yes, please.
Okay. I'm trying to open my video. I couldn't. So anyway, I enumerated the things I picked up. I'm sure there are more, but the number one to me that struck me really is all of these things that you shared with us is really possible in a work environment that's agile at scale to begin with, because you would have already imbibed the values that you speak of and that are embedded in the other practices. I did not capture the leaders. I got the essence of the two sets of leaders, your functional administrative leader, and then, but there's another set of leaders who will address maybe more the emotional, the well-being side of our team members. No? And then I also captured tools and techniques. What struck me that's a little different is the social contract, because that's not normally done, as well as the option, the choices, giving your employees choices not to come to work. And the reason for coming to work is mostly for meaningful group events. Okay. And then finally, what I captured also is the feedbacking process that's made more frequent than the usual once a year I speak or whatever pulsing you have. Huh? And I like it that you said you are wary of scores that are very high, because then it gives you a sense that people are not really being honest in the feedback. So those are the things that I appreciate a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pia, once again for summarizing it so well. And thank you, Esther and Alex. It was amazing fireside chat. It was truly insightful. I think the final word that Alex said on, stop trying to go back to normal, look forward. I think that's the main key lesson from this fireside chat today. So thank you so much. And with this session, we will wrap the Futurist Forum. Thank you everyone for taking our time and joining us here. It was great to host you. Special thanks to all our speakers today, Sarah, Monica, Alex, Esther, for sharing your insights and experiences so generously with all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, now you can move on to the main track sessions, and do not forget to join us in the evening for the Tech HR Night Fest, for the night filled with laughter and networking. Thank you once again, everyone. See you on the other side. Take care and bye-bye.